There are two things that I highly regret today, taking Italian rather than German. I hope it was good, the introduction, and forgetting an umbrella, and thank God I had something to change with today. So I'm really happy to be here today, and again, such a shame not to be able to speak German because the program looks very exciting. We're scaling right now from startup to a more mature company and living all the pains from talent acquisition to retention, so I'm sure there's a lot to say today. But let me tell you a bit about my story. So I started indeed in L'Oréal selling luxury cosmetics. And I remember very clearly when the CEO came in to meet with us, so we were in the team in Italy, and asking to the team of young talents, who is willing to stay here for the next 10 years? And so the whole room raises its hand, except for me. So of course I had a HR appointment after that. And I was asked to explain why. And for me, it was such a sincere answer. It was, I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 years. There are so many internal, external factors. And sincerely, do you want me in 10 years? And so this whole kind of 2-3 years in L'Oréal, I realized that there was kind of this sense of content, and it's true. I'm unfortunately part of those millennials, and we're all searching for a purpose, and I felt like I didn't have my purpose. And it came more radically with this video from a Nike advertisement that was showing these inspirational quotes, and Eleanor Roosevelt was saying, do one thing every day that scares you. And I was horrified at what point I was not doing that. So the first scary thing I did is as soon as I had an opportunity, I met with my co-founders, and they talked about building this international network and meeting with entrepreneurs, and I went in 2013 to do a 10-month tour with enough money to last 2 months to build the first ever startup competition in 20 countries in emerging markets. And today, what was a crazy dream is now our company that we are trying to scale, which is an investment company that tries to operate over 20 markets in emerging markets. We have today the biggest startup competition in 80 cities, and we also have innovation centers, acceleration programs, and other initiatives to support, invest, and connect these entrepreneurs in emerging markets. Why? Because during my tour, it was obvious how far I was back in not understanding what was going on in these markets. You see, if I say Colombia, Rwanda, or Philippines, what comes to your mind? Every time, repetitively, in any audience in Europe, what comes to the mind, the first thing is drug, genocide, and typhoons. And I respect the media to explain to us these horrific situations, and I'm not here to minimize them, but there is also responsibility of making us believe that that is the only side, that is the only story to these markets, when the reality is there's unbelievable opportunities to seize and unbelievable talent to collaborate with. So this chaos, I know it really well, because living in Nigeria, this is representing the traffic in Lagos, a city of 20 million people from the country Nigeria, which is said to be over 180 million people. And in this same chaos for us, there is a whole lot of opportunities, because in the end, fundamentally, everyone wants a great education. Everyone wants a great healthcare system, even if they haven't experienced it. Everyone wants nice things and wants to travel like you and me. So how do we see the world? Well, we see it quite differently. The reality is this emerging market that scares so many will represent 85% of the world population. And even though the GDP per capita, the gap is still huge between the developed and the developing world, and it's sometimes 30 to 40 times, that same gap is the opportunity of a middle class that is growing. You see, when we try to assess the opportunity of a new market, GDP per capita can be one good indicator of social progress, also in terms of talent acquisition. Well, indeed, the developed world is green. But if we switch the lenses, suddenly, these same zones become red. Because this time, we're looking at the percentage of people without internet. Today, there are still 4 billion people without internet, and in the next years only, 400 million are going to come online thanks to 10 economies that are in emerging markets. If you think just of Facebook, for example, that everyone knows, the cities where they have the highest number of users is Jakarta or Bangkok, and definitely not London or New York. 2015 was actually the year where half of the global GDP tipped to emerging markets. And by 2050, it's expected that 90% of the world's young population, the workforce, less than 30 years old, is going to be located in emerging markets. Nigeria, which I mentioned, which is approximate, we don't have very clear data, 180 million people, is expected to reach 440 million people by 2050. By 2020, so tomorrow, 80% of all smartphones, not feature phones, smartphones, will be located in emerging markets. Not in the US, not in Europe. And so you see, with this kind of inevitable centering to emerging markets, we're in this very interesting time that technology has brought. Because the adoption rate at which we are having millions of consumers on a new technology is getting faster and faster and faster. Remember, it took us over 100 years to get to 1 billion telephone users and less than 10 for the smartphone. On top, what we are assisting in these markets is the leapfrogging effect, which is when we skip one technology directly to a more efficient, less costly, and usually more sustainable technology. And the most famous example is indeed, we skipped landlines directly to mobile phones in emerging markets. Everyone is hyping about this mobile economy coming in Europe. We only talk mobile economy in these markets. And to give you an even more concrete example, if you think of Kenya, a country in Africa, today, over 50% of the whole GDP of the country passes through one mobile payment application called M-Pesa. Give me one country in Europe that is at this stage. And so M-Pesa, what it is, and this is so leapfrogging in financial services, is that in Nigeria, I don't have a subscription for my telephone. So what I do is I'm going to buy a prepaid card, for example, for $10, and this airtime is going to allow me to make calls and surf the internet. Well, this same airtime actually becomes a virtual currency that I can use to do anything. So you travel to these countries where the percentage of illiteracy is still extremely high, yet they are all paying with their mobile phone the groceries, getting an insurance out of it, or getting a loan. And we see it again in other industries, renewable energies, which is kind of the big hype right now in these markets. So it's going to be microgrid solutions, definitely, because we're mainly talking about rural areas. But here you have a solar kit that can provide enough electricity for one hut around the world. And this replaces kerosene, which is extremely, extremely unhealthy, and suddenly electricity becomes the launch pad of an economy, because it's never just about providing light. It's about providing education, so children can study at night. It's about providing security, so that there are lights in the streets at night. And it's fundamentally about providing production for the local economy. And here, more of a fun example is that we realize so many times we talk about digitalization killing jobs in Europe, and we're seeing it also in certain competencies in HR, but the reality is in these markets, actually, we didn't even start. So no wonder that the biggest share of the pie in e-commerce is now in Southeast Asia. And from these different industries, we create indirect industries, and we build infrastructures that never existed and that would never allow us to build sustainable megacities of tomorrow, which will be residing in these economies. For example, our winner a couple years ago, OKHI in Kenya, built this very smart tool because he was tackling a very big issue in these markets. Is still 4 billion people do not have a physical address. So my life goes like this, and I still don't know where I'm going, and you lose hours. And in Nigeria, you can buy names of roads, so the road you were given has changed in the next 6 months. In Costa Rica, they give us palm trees as indications to go left or right, which is not very useful. And he uses geolocalization with images to be able to create a digital address book. First clients, of course, are e-commerce to reduce the time to delivery. And finally, these economies probably will be the launchpad of innovation in many ways. And also we're seeing in terms of legislation and how corporates are being built and the rules around it, because they don't have the same cultural consumer habits and heritage. They don't have the same lobbying. You can imagine that if Visa and MasterCard were so strong in Africa, we wouldn't have the success story of M-Pesa in Kenya. They don't have the same legislation and heavy infrastructure where the maintenance cost is so high, we can't just start from scratch. And so President Kagame from Rwanda, the same country that still too many people only compare to the genocide, the horrific story that happened a decade ago, is actually the same country that today is opening up the first drone airport in the world. And he's changing the aerial regulations. This is a nationwide initiative. And firsthand, it will be to be able to transport blood supply from one hospital to another, but then you can imagine all the other initiatives that can be launched. So we've got technology that is really changing the game, and we can finally talk about the next chapter in Africa and Latin America. And on the other side, you have entrepreneurship. It's booming everywhere. Every government I've traveled to is supporting directly or indirectly some form of entrepreneurship initiative, because they are managing the 90% of the young population of tomorrow, and they don't have jobs for them. So entrepreneurship is a sustainable solution to these issues, one of them. According to some surveys, we talk about 400 million entrepreneurs around the world. Knowing that 90% of startups fail, that's okay, because that's part of the journey. You fail to succeed. That's the story of any business. And many times what we've seen, now we've accumulated over, I think, 18,000 applications over the past 4 years that allows us to have really interesting data on what it is to build a company in these markets. And I have to say that team still is fundamentally one of the most important issues above fundraising and missing the market fit. And so we had to put in place kind of this index to be able to rank and better understand these ecosystems if we wanted to support these talents in emerging markets and support the businesses that they wanted to scale. And so we have many factors, quantitative and qualitative, but it finally comes back down to 3 pillars, which is culture, the assessment of failure, and sincerely, apart from Tel Aviv and Silicon Valley, I haven't seen it. I don't think Germans are much more comfortable with failure, even though we're starting to see some hype. Environment, and this finally goes down to what the government has to say and the type of legislation and infrastructure that is put in place to support the growth of the business. And opportunity, the market and the talent, of course, to build these businesses. And yet again, we have the same gap that we see with the GDP per capita if we use Silicon Valley as our benchmark. But what I think is that we really cannot use the same methodology and the same story that Silicon Valley had to succeed. And so we're going to have to rethink the model on how we build these economies. To give you a more simplified example, think of e-commerce. Okay, so in Europe, it's quite easy to launch an e-commerce. For example, you open up on Shopify, you use PayPal as the payment gateway, and you've got Post, DHL, FedEx, different delivery services. Not the same story in these markets. So Jumia, which is the biggest e-commerce in Africa, for example, actually had to think of putting in place their own payment gateway, their own procurement system, in order to reap the benefits of their core business. So there are these kind of major, if we can call it sunk cost, infrastructure costs, so that you can succeed. And I'm not saying you succeed less. I think there are huge opportunities and benefits, but the way to approach it is very different. Same with entrepreneurship. We couldn't come in and spray and pray and invest there and there. We had to build a whole infrastructure to monitor and support these entrepreneurs. And so it's kind of the entrepreneurship from A to Z, where we have different organizations and business units that follow the entrepreneur from ideation to scaling of the business. And it comes down to SeedStars World, so this startup competition that we initially built that allows us, before anything, to be the vehicle to leverage a network and support the connections and provide visibility, because I'm not sure if you know what's happening in Moldova or what's happening in even Republic Dominican, which has some really cool entrepreneurs. Seed space, because that same connectivity, that network has to live all year long. So now we have spaces all over the world, and really to become that hub to reunite the different stakeholders building an ecosystem, and of course an acceleration program for the startups that we meet with, and an academy, because when we were working with talents on the ground, we realized that there was a big gap in education. Talent is everywhere. That's obvious. The problem is it's still, if I may say so, raw. And they don't have the same network education. And it's not as meritocratic as in Europe to build a business. So we had to, again, kind of pay that upfront cost of training this talent so we could reap the full potential, because I will not succeed in Nigeria and Colombia by bringing in expats. That cannot work anymore. So you have to spend the time of building the local talent and the local economy. And so we really, at the end, when we started our first hub in Nigeria, it was, okay, the only thing we can believe in is we need someone smart and we need someone adaptable. And so we put in place different quantitative and qualitative assessments so that we could get candidates with whom we could grow businesses on the ground. And what was interesting, the growth mindset is one assessment that we use to understand the adaptability of a candidate, which for me is basically his hustling factor. Are they street smart? And this, whereas you can see, Nigerians scored highest. And it's the same, for example, in Argentina and Latin America. They understand adaptability because their environment is so chaotic. They have to move around they have to hack the system so that they can survive, that we fundamentally find that in their traits. So what we lose maybe in the more, in the logics tests, in the case studies, we win in their hustling aptitude, which is for us as a startup as important in order to scale. So more than the arbitrage of cost, we're also able to tap into a talent which is very unique that I couldn't find easily in other markets. And so thinking here and trying to understand what have we done right, and the so many things we've done wrong over the past 4 years, from scaling to indeed 2.5 people to 60 people today, I think what kind of resonates peculiar to SeedStars, I mean, we've tried to follow, and we try still today to follow the rules that you know better than I. But what's the sense in SeedStars and how we're able to recruit this team that's following us is said quite well in this post that Katarina, which was one of our team members, and she's now operating the whole SeedStars World competition, said, "This mysterious life we lead, one made 2015 the happiest year of my life." Hard to say. So now I'm like terrified because I'm hoping there's a blog post this year saying 2016 was the happiest year of her life. If not, I mean, as a manager, I'm going down from there. But it's hard to say. It's hard to say, but I think it's what we millennials are, is for what? Why are we doing this? What's this all about? And with my co-founders, we never wanted again to spend a day or be in a situation where we were thrilled, over-ecstatic about our Fridays and depressing on Sundays. Now we're depressing every day, but at least we wanted that kind of bigger sense. And so if you go online, you actually can find these websites that give you an indication according to what you eat, how you sleep, if you smoke or not, what would be the day that you die. And according to a website, I'm supposed to die on May 11, 2077. And I take this quite in a positive note, in the sense that This just reminds us, and we really do take this seriously, that it's got to count. And I've got to decide now how I want to live my life, how I want to enjoy my life, and how I want to have an impact on this life. And I think this really resonates not only to us, but every entrepreneur I've encountered. There really is this strong sense of purpose. And I think that's why, one of the reasons why Katharina has joined us. It's about our vision also, because the purpose behind made sense. And our vision is to have an impact on millions of people in emerging markets through technology and entrepreneurship. And that resonated to her. And what we realized is I don't think we are a company providing a job. We are a platform where one can be aligned with the vision, can be comfortable with the culture, and can abide by our values. But from there, they're growing with their personal brand and their personal ambitions. And many of the members in our company will come to build, and I hope to be the first investor supporter platform to help them accelerate. And so we live it because we have Marcello doing his own TEDx on what he believes is going to be the future of Africa. Someone else did their own newsletter on the newest disruptions. We have Julian that put in place the first network of women entrepreneurs across Latin America. We have Selam in Ethiopia launching initiatives to kind of create a momentum at a national level. And that really is their personal ambitions, but it works for us because we're aligned on the mission, the culture, and the values. And so it comes also to no surprise that for her, what was probably, when she said the happiest year of her life, she could also say the most difficult year of her life, because you're the machine, because we put them in such extreme chaotic situation across the globe, especially the ones traveling that are 10 months on the go, and we take them out young. I mean, we're 27, that's the average age. And so it's about knowing yourself. There's no choice. The first thing you hit is yourself, and you have to learn how to motivate yourself. You have to learn, what does it mean when I'm close to a burnout? How do I manage that? And we have all this to manage. And for me, what I use religiously now, and you'll probably think it's stupid, and there are probably, I don't know how many studies proving it doesn't exist in me, but 16 personalities. I mean, even in my family, my sister, now I understand her so much better because of this. And we use it because when I'm having a Zoom conference or Skype conference in Peru, and it's breaking up every 10 minutes, I know better how to react to that person, because I know they're an introvert, extrovert, are they going to speak, or are they not going to participate in a brainstorm? So that changed our lives in terms of reducing the tensions. I think she's aligned with our values. We paid the hard price of trying to democratize this whole values and asking everyone what they felt. Bad idea. In the end, it's us, it's the founders, it's the core team, it's who we are. And now you're in or you're out. But we're ready to now have that pain that incurs the values. And so we have some strange ones, such as keep it Swiss. So we're HQ'd in Switzerland, and we use the Swiss-made brand very highly, especially in a competition where neutrality is so important. But it means, if I can, in French we say, c'est propre. So it's always clean. I don't know if it's in the sense that at whatever stage of development you are in a presentation, in a discussion, in a negotiation, it's got to be clean. Okay, it's something very peculiar to us. You live it very quickly once you join the company, and we've now aligned all our performance reviews. Every feedback we give, we have to align it with one of the values so that people understand, yeah, you're part of this culture, and you've got to want to grow with it. You want to improve on this. If not, it's okay. We're not the right fit for you, and we built a company. You can do it too, and you can find something more appropriate. So this is obvious. Culture beats smart every time. And again, I don't want to repeat on that, but for us, personally, it's so important, this rule. And I put the video here of Paul Graham, which is the founder of one of the very famous accelerators in the States, because I heard it from him, this no asshole rule. And it's really important for us because we've lost very good performers because of this. But it's for us short-term gain that kills the long-term performance of the team. So we're very comfortable in saying we do not want assholes, and we do know how to identify one, and we will not continue to collaborate with you. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, because we're still a startup in many ways. We give a lot of responsibility and accountability to our team members, so they really got to get comfortable with that. Again, the ones traveling, you have to imagine that they go to countries they've never been to. We put them in really harsh situations. They have their own P&L to manage. And so what happens is that in April, there's the excitement of this dream job. In May, June, everyone crashes, so we're like stopping fires across the globe, and then they understand reality expectations kick in, and we start to thrive on it. But what's reassuring is that the year is over. They realize what a year it was, because that's how magic operates in the end. No pain, no gain. So, this was very tough. This is still tough for us, and I mean, we have a purpose, so I feel like sometimes we're more aligned with the millennials. But we've got a real issue with millennials, including myself. The resilience is low to anything. And I've got comments like, my learning curve is not steep enough, which I go crazy, or I believe I'm an expert after 6 months. Well, it still takes 5 to 10 years until we wait for robots to do it for us. But so we are living this, and it's tough. And this was another blog post of Claudia overseeing Africa. When she says, trust me, being a digital nomad in Africa is a whole other ballgame, she means like with exhaustion, like trust me. Don't do this, because it's really tough. And I think what Simon Sinek says is true. It's now our responsibility, which sucks even more, because we would have expected that the education and the parenting system would support us in teaching them the realities and how to manage expectations. But we're such in a culture of immediate everything, and on top we believe we're special and we're exceptional, and on top we believe we're going to have an impact. So we're very paradoxical and complicated to manage, and so now we have to spend really time and resources in managing their emotions, in teaching them how to use these emotions, and with many times the fear of losing them, because they're so young when they come in Seed Stars. The best way to realize this, and that it's okay that life is boring every day, that's life, means they have to leave and experience other experiences. Global means global for us. Our ambitions are extremely global. We will always want to have a footprint in all continents. The clients, maybe the investors, the startups, the governments, the corporates that we work with are global. So it comes to no surprise that our team is global. Out of 60 people, I think we represent now nearly 14 nationalities, and it's more than natural for us. You can see the different time zones according to the hair. But yeah, that's something really fundamental to us, and we're very lucky, because I feel like many companies don't get to access so easily this diversity, which by far is our biggest strength, and we've never needed to think of quotas or conscious activities and initiatives to keep this the priority in our company. Don't be stupid. It's a reminder that we give to our employees, because they're so accountable. I can only expect that they are responsible. The moment I doubt that, my business model fails. So we've had to put in place a very open system where there are no vacation policies, even though it's very hard because they work even more, and so we have to manage that, because everyone needs a downtime. May it be different, but everyone needs a downtime. We'd never check hours, but of course, that's tough also. And so as soon as we see them derailing from the KPIs, then we go back to daily calls, but we're trying. We have a no hotel policy because when you operate in Iran or Nigeria or Colombia, in terms of security, I feel more comfortable knowing they're at the Habitat or in an Airbnb whatsoever. But more importantly, they've got to understand the rules of the games very quickly and the cultural differences, and you do not learn that in a hotel. And fundamentally, it comes back to for what? For what? Because according to that website, I've got 21,950 days left. So I've got to make sure that every day counts. Thank you very much for your time. And maybe, so that you can understand with what kind of freaks I'm working with, here's a short video for you.
All right, 1, 2, and 5. I got all my startups with me. Ambassador! Family!